Tessie San Martin serves as the CEO of FHI 360, a nonprofit development organization that works in over 70 countries around the world. I met Tessie in 2011 when I started at Plan International USA, another INGO, where Tessie was then the CEO. There I quickly learned how proficient she was at modeling critical leadership skills, including cultivating humility and surrounding yourself with talented people, creating a constructive, innovative work environment, listening and communicating well, developing resilient strategies and systems, and a host of others. In this interview, Tessie transparently shared her journey in both the for-profit and nonprofit worlds, FHI 360's mission, and the essential ingredients of strong and effective nonprofit leadership. Not surprisingly and consistent with her everyday leadership, her virtues shone through brilliantly and brightly. Here's my conversation with Tessie. Tessie San Martin, welcome to the Nonprofiteers Podcast.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
It's so good to see you.
Likewise.
And it's in the interest of full disclosure, you and I worked together for 3 years, I think from 2011 through 2014. And, not to get things started with, unnecessary flattery, but it was really my privilege to work with you. And I have a handful of mentors that have made a big difference in my life and helped me, be a good leader and see things differently, both professionally and personally. So I'm very grateful to you for that.
Thank you, Chip. I will want you to know, not to just feel like I need to return the compliment, but you've been and it came up lately because we've been looking for visionary leadership in the IT function here, and you were my role. And it turns out that you're a total unicorn, and we found a very good person who's not
good.
But there are no other Chips. It's just you.
Well, that's very nice for you to say that. Of course, I can't agree with that, but it's very nice to hear. So let's start by hearing about your history with FHI 360 and even earlier, how you got into nonprofit and, became a nonprofit leader. And
Right.
I should say also that you're the CEO of FHI 360.
Well, thanks. Yeah, no, great question. And honestly, I've never not wanted to be in international development. That has been my North Star from very early days. When I was still in high school, I joined this nonprofit group called Amigos de las Americas, and they sent, which in hindsight was a kind of crazy thing, but they sent high school kids, high school and some university age kids, but mostly high school kids, to Central America and South America to vaccinate. We went down with our own vaccines, and I got to participate at the age of 16 and 17 in vaccination programs. And I led vaccination programs at the young age of 17 and 18, which, honestly, nobody should have put a syringe in my hand, but it taught me a lot about what it was to work in some of these programs. The organization continues today. They do community development. But I guess I got the bug then. It's like, this is really interesting work. It's really important. It's consequential. I need to be involved. And my whole professional career, I've been one way or another doing international development. I should say, because you asked me about sort of nonprofit, most of my professional career was spent in international development, but on the for-profit side. I started working for a small consulting company called J.E. Austin Associates, and ended up sort of opening their Washington office and leading a lot of their work out of Washington, D.C. And then I went to Price Waterhouse, which became PwC, which became PwC Consulting, which became IBM. And I left IBM because I didn't think that they wanted to be in that sector. So I went to the World Bank, and then I left that and I went to Apt Associates. So it's all to say that until the very end of 2010, when I joined Plan International USA, I had not been in the nonprofit sector. I joined Plan because the mission called out to me. They were focused on children. That's how I had started with a lot of these vaccination programs. But, if I can be honest, I also went to Plan International USA because the job on offer was a CEO job. And I felt that
Mm.
that was the next
Yeah.
step. And
Yeah.
then from there, I came to FHI 360, which is an amazing organization. And I kind of feel like everything I have done until this time when I took the job with FHI 360 has prepared me to lead what is a very innovative organization, nonprofit in our sector.
Yeah, good. That's the way it ought to be, right? Like whether the experience is good or bad, you should be
Right,
able to take something away from it,
right.
right? Yeah. But I think, at least from my point of view, your experience at Plan was great.
I enjoyed it. And it's such a different organization from
Yeah.
this in every way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And that just kind of tells you the broad range of opportunities that exist in the nonprofit sector.
Right. Right. So you talked about getting the bug at an early age, which is great. What resonates with you? What deeply resonates with you about this work? Because we can all say we're doing good, it's consequential. I'd rather be on the right side of the equation than, the helping side of the equation than the non-helping or hurting side of the equation. But what about the work deeply resonates with you?
I mean, it's the impact that I feel that a lot of our work can have. Not that we can't have that kind of impact working in other sectors, but for me, it's always resonated that you can really invisible and oftentimes, not always, measurable ways be improving not just an individual's life, but the reverberations throughout the community with which you're engaged.
Yeah. It sort of obliterates the boundary between what's good for you, the nonprofit leader, and what's good for your beneficiaries. It's really good for everyone.
It's true.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I know FHI 360 is multi-sector, but how would you describe the mission and vision, and particularly the differentiators for FHI 360?
All right. Well, good question. So we have spent some time rebranding. So I will start with what our official statement is, which I think actually does capture it, right? So, we talk of ourselves as a global organization that mobilizes research, resources, and relationships so that people everywhere have access to opportunities that they need to lead full, productive, thriving, lives. And so, in a nutshell, what that tries to capture, I think, are several things, and it does speak to what's a differentiator for us. I think a big differentiator for us is our research and our
Yeah.
evidence, right? That we are really very much sort of evidence driven. We
Mm.
really are. I think what differentiates us from others in our sector is the knowledge that resides within the broad set of things that we do. And we actually take that research really seriously. Ironically, and I don't think that we're the only ones in the sector, for an organization for which research, evidence, knowledge is such an important part of our ethos, our DNA, who we are, and our differentiator,
Mhm.
we haven't been investing enough in
Mm.
knowledge management systems that put
Yeah.
that knowledge and that evidence more easily at the fingertips of everyone in the organization. So there's no question that that's part of what we need to improve and what we're setting up to improve now.
Yeah. Interesting. And how can you not be evidence-based in the modern world with all the complexities and uncertainty and everything else, right?
No, I agree. I'll tell you a quick story. And by the way, it speaks to the moment for INGOs like ourselves. That is the fact that for a variety of really good reasons, we have seen that local organizations are able to do many of the things that we as international NGOs used to just do ourselves and think of it as the thing we did, right? Local organizations that really have a lot of local knowledge and relationships and networks are, I think, better positioned than we are in many cases to deliver services. So what our value added is not our ability to be compliant with the US government, deliver services at a certain scale, but really the fact that we can combine that local engagement with a global knowledge and a global footprint and really bring that to support local solutions and local efforts. And that is what differentiates us. So I was in Nigeria earlier this year. As a result of this transition from a lot of the work being done by INGOs to more of the work being done by local organizations.
Right.
Nigeria is a really good example. We used to have, many years ago, we used to have a portfolio in Nigeria that was as big as 800 million. That portfolio in Nigeria, and it was prime awards, and we were delivering services in a variety of areas. Today, that portfolio is much smaller, it's maybe 100 million. We're no longer the prime. Now we're a sub awardee to local organizations.
Interesting.
Right. Yeah. And what the team said is like, well, with this transition, we have lost our seat at the table because we get invited to all these meetings by virtue of the fact that we were the prime awardee. And now no longer invited because we're no longer the prime. And what I told the team is, well, maybe we won't be invited to the table because we're not the prime any longer. We should be invited to the table because of our ideas. It is the power of our ideas that is going to get us to the table, not whatever contractual obligation we have with one donor or another. So we have to make sure that we can harvest those ideas. We can package them in a way that is understandable and compelling to policymakers. So that's all on us. But I think we have that, and we have to act on it.
To me, that's the most compelling combination, which is you're bringing global knowledge and research power, and the local communities are more responsible for implementation. And the reason that's such a beautiful idea is because, to me, it seems much more sustainable to do it that way.
I agree. And that is the bet, right? And why we ourselves, as a large actor in this area, are leaning so heavily into locally led development and localization, because we do believe, although more research is needed across the board and we're investing on that ourselves, we believe that that does lead to more sustainable outcomes in the longer term. No question about it.
Right. It's the old, there's a coaching metaphor in there. It's about enablement. It's not about telling your client the answers. It's about enablement. Yeah. Since you've been at FHI 360, what have been the most challenging things that have, name 2 or 3 ridiculously challenging things that might, that threaten to drive you nuts? Clearly, they haven't driven you nuts, but,
Not yet. Well, I think we do have a variety of challenges. One is, look, we are in the middle of a transformation and a reorganization. I think any reorganization is a challenge. No one likes change. But I think we also recognize that, look, and we just talked about one of the changes, right? The fact that local organizations, in part as a result of our own success as a sector, in terms of, supporting, enabling, strengthening local actors across the board, that they can do a lot of the things that we were doing, right? The other reality, I think, is that the world for which we were created way back, like 50, 55 years ago, right? Back in the 20th century, we can think that far back. That world is not the world in which we exist today. That was, we were created to deliver development assistance in low resource but stable settings. Right. Those are not the settings generally in which we're operating today. The settings might be low resource, but they are now oftentimes highly kinetic, fragile, high displacement. So how do we deliver effective, sustainable assistance in environments? The operating context is entirely different, right? In environments that are very different. How do we then lean into this idea that it's really less about what we know about compliance? We know a lot about compliance and service delivery, and more about evidence and the knowledge that we have, the technical expertise, right? So that requires new structures. It requires new systems. So the reorganization
Mm-hmm.
is no question a big challenge.
Mm-hmm.
The other challenge, and this will seem almost a little bit counterintuitive, but the reality is that change is easier to sell if you're not successful, right? What is like the proverbial burning platform, right? It's like you got to
It's
change, right? You got to change because what we've been
yeah,
doing is not working. Well,
yeah.
here's the reality.
It's the crisis principle in change management. If you don't have a crisis, create one,
Well,
which is a bit cynical, but it's actually true,
but
right?
it's true, right? But here's the deal. We don't have a crisis. And in
Yeah,
fact, this year so our fiscal year ends September 30, it's been a phenomenally successful year.
yeah,
So, that leads to two types of reaction, right? Both of them can really upend, dislocate a broader transformation effort. Reaction one is, hey, we've been super successful. I'm very busy now, standing up all the new awards that we have. I don't have time for this change business. Okay. So
right.
go bother somebody else. The other reaction is, I'm sorry, tell me again why we're changing. Clearly, the way we've been operating, what we've been doing would tell you that we don't need to change. We've won a lot and we're going to
Yeah,
continue to win a lot. So I don't need to change. So success, is creating, more than a few headwinds in the organization. And so
right.
in the way that we message, that we talk about our success, we need to continue to repeat the fact that we do long term, we need to change. And what I tell our team is, okay, so one successful year does not make for a fully successful future till the end of days, right? And
Mhm.
anybody who's observing what's happening in foreign assistance can see that the amount that the US government, but also other governments, France, Italy, the European Union, Australia, the amount that all these major donors are dedicating to foreign assistance, that is at best flat, but usually going down. And if
Yeah,
you couple that with the reality that of that amount that is now flat or going down, increasing proportion is going to local organizations, you'd
yeah,
have to be asleep to think that we're going to continue on an upward trajectory forever and ever. No, our addressable market is constraining over time.
yeah,
So we need to be thinking again about how we structure ourselves to be successful in that kind of future, not the present that we're in today. So
yeah.
anyway, those are the things that keep me up at night.
Yeah, you said a bunch of great things there. That success can be a kind of tranquilizer. You know,
Yeah.
there are tons of companies who have been successful and then don't innovate and don't make change and don't adapt and rely on their legacy products or their legacy services or their legacy approach. And it's not good for the long run. Do you think the biggest catalyst then for FHI 360 to make change or to initiate change was it the shift in, as you described it earlier, from you providing services to tapping more into local services? Was that the main catalyst?
Well, the main catalyst for the change has been sort of the strategy that we put together as a
Mm-hmm.
whole organization that called out the fact that our sector is changing and that we need to adapt, and that is true irrespective of whatever we do from year to year in terms
Yeah,
of winning work. It's also a strategy that calls for us to be prioritizing not just how much revenue we're getting and how many sales we're producing, but what impact we're having. And that's not, that's a question. Chip, you've been in the sector. Every INGO talks about the impact that we're having, but the reality is that impact is super hard to conceptualize and then
yeah,
measure.
yeah,
Um, and so we're all then, we usually then default to what's the easiest thing to measure? Dollars, right? So if I'm
yeah,
big, obviously I'm successful.
yeah,
Until you're not big, and this is the conversation that we're having now. And by the way, super difficult to do, I think, in an organization that does so many things. So we're very big in global
yeah,
health, but we also do global education. We do civil society and peace building. We do youth engagement and workforce development and
Yeah.
we address youth recidivism in the United States. So
Yeah.
how do we talk about the impact that we're having in a portfolio that is so big? And so what we're settling on is the idea that, so let's talk about sustainability, which is a theme that you started at the beginning, right?
Mhm.
Let's look at sustainability in the outcomes that each and every one of our 300 plus projects is producing, right? So let's
Right.
look at how we think about the sustainability of the outcomes that we're producing. And then let's invest in establishing a framework for sustainability that's going to allow us to develop at least some common ways of measuring and framing
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
overall impact that our organization is having in the context of sustainability. We're
Yeah.
still in the process of doing that, so don't ask me how that's working, and don't ask me what our overall sustainability score is, because we're not there yet, but
Yeah.
that's the intent.
Yeah. Well, nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? You have to go after it. The whole thing of metrics in global development work is been a challenge. I started, as you know, I started at Mercy Corps in 2008. I think that was my first nonprofit experience. And one of the biggest perpetual topics was metrics and how you evaluate your success. It's a non-trivial,
Yeah.
huge thing, because not just for beneficiaries, but for board members, for donors, for everyone who's part of the organization, it's really important to be able to communicate that, right?
Yeah, yeah, particularly, and we have an ambition to move. So we're about 95% plus of our funding comes from the US government. And a
Yeah.
big chunk of that is USAID.
Hmm.
But we have an ambition to do more. We have some really good partnerships with a variety of private donors, but we want to do more in that area. You know better than most that the pitch to private donors is so very different than any
Yeah.
proposal that you put
Completely.
together for the US
Absolutely.
government, right? And so being able to speak passionately and knowledgeably about sort of our secret sauce and why we know that it works in the context of the sustainability that we're trying to achieve. I just think that's really important as we move to, private donor markets.
Yeah. You said something earlier that I want to come back to. You were talking about your reorg, and I started thinking about the VUCA world we live in: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, right? And how reorganization may be, in a way, a continuous thing now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, we think we've always thought of it, okay, we're doing a reorg now, like it's a discrete thing, right? But, what are your thoughts on building an organization that is constantly, continually adaptable and resilient and can make changes?
Well, I mean, great question. And of course, I have been in every context that I've been in, whether it's for profit or nonprofit, you do a reorg. And then the first question you get asked is, okay, well, that's it, right? And my answer is inevitably the same one, which is no, that's never it, right? Because the world is not standing still. And just because we've done our reorg doesn't, to fit a particular moment or sort of span of time doesn't mean that that's what's going to be necessary forever. And you're right. We have, I mean, it's hugely volatile, hugely unpredictable and unstable. And so we need to make sure that what we're building in is a capacity to be agile and
Mhm.
continue to change. And that is as much about systems as it is about mindset and culture. And we're building up to be an organization like that. We're not an organization like that now, but I don't know of many organizations in our sector that are always changing, always. It's uncomfortable. It's not
Yeah.
expensive. It can be
Right.
distracting, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera.
Yeah. You can't be, constantly rototilling because it's costly. right. But I was as a technology guy, I was very happy to hear you say that, the systems are and processes are as important if you want agility and resilience as the mindset and the leadership. I'd still say that mindset and leadership are the most important, but systems are very, very important.
They really are. And we are seeing that now. I mean, we need to invest in improving, upgrading our systems. And by the way, we started this reorganization. And what we've done for the largest part of the organization is agree on a structure. And what I tell people is, okay, the hard part now are the processes, the procedures, and the systems that support that. And that's
right.
That we're starting now. The boxes are just the boxes, right?
That's right.
There's nothing magical in a new configuration unless you're really investing in making that configuration work.
Yeah. And in a world where things are changing constantly, future proofing is also almost impossible and very challenging.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, that word, right? Future proofing. What is that? Right?
It's not real.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Because I was going to ask you, what is that, Chip? Because
yeah.
I don't know what it is. All I know is that we need to be building, even the way we budget, how we think about staffing, we need to be building in sort of agility, a capacity to expand and contract or go in different directions. We need to be more agile in that regard. I don't know, I would be lying to you if I said, oh, I know exactly how we're going to do that.
Yeah. No, it's complicated, and it takes practice, and it takes time, and it takes a ton of communication to get everyone aligned and kind of pulling in the same direction in the same way. If it were easy, everyone would be doing it, right?
Yeah.
So what are your, if you think about the nonprofit leadership principles, like this goes to your philosophy. What are your principles? It can be philosophical, practical, both, hopefully, on leadership, being a leader, being a model, being effective, being productive. What are the principles that you bring to bear in your leadership work?
Wow. Good question. I guess I would say it starts with humility, in the sense that I try to model that I don't think I'm necessarily the smartest person in the room. I don't have all the answers. And that's a pretty profound statement, because the reality is that when people talk to the CEO, they go, well, what, you're telling me you don't have all the answers? If you don't have all the answers, who does? But I think I don't want to be the person that is, going out there saying, well, I know exactly how all of this is going to play out, which is honestly a fine line because you do need to motivate and inspire people. You need to paint a compelling picture of where we're going and why. But I do not want to pretend that I know all the different ways in which we can get there. I think, and this is the pleasure of working in a place like FHI 360, that is just chock full of really smart people. It is one of the joys of being in this organization, is I think there are any number of people that really have a very good view of how we can get there. And so I see it as my job to create that space so that they can innovate. And that includes being okay with failure, okay with failure. And you and I have talked about that.
Absolutely.
In the past, is being willing to give that grace and say, not everything we try is going to work. What we need to do is not bury that, but highlight it, because only if you do that, then can we all learn from it. And so that comes with that humility, the importance that I put on feedback loops, on making sure that as a leader, I'm listening and seeking as many different voices as possible. This is not about disrupting the chain of command, because I know that gets people nervous. But, leaders exist in these little bubbles. And I think
absolutely.
biggest, threats to our effectiveness as leaders is that we're trapped in those bubbles. And then we
Correct.
don't hear what is going on because people say, well, I don't think you want to hear it. And then that's when, things go off the rail. That willingness to learn, that space for failure, that transparency, and I guess at the end of the day, also accountability, right? One of the things that's very different in a for-profit than a nonprofit, and you and I have talked about measurement. Success for everyone in the private sector is super easy to measure. And at the end of the day, it really has to be with there's clarity about the bottom line. And you're either
Right.
contributing to it or detracting from it. In our
Right.
sector, sometimes that's harder to capture. So we need to find ways to provide clear metrics, to provide clear guidance to everybody, but then hold people accountable for the results
Yeah.
the same way we would in any kind of organization.
Yeah. You named some fantastic principles. And if I can compliment you again, the one thing I remember from working with you and from watching you work with other members of the executive team and everyone, frankly, was your openness and vulnerability and your willingness to listen to anyone. And that doesn't make you indecisive. That doesn't make you weak. It's an admission that no one leader, no one person can know everything that needs to be known to effectively run the organization. So you're a fool if you don't surround yourself with brilliant people who know more than you do in lots of areas, right? Pat Metheny, one of my favorite quotes, said, I always make sure I'm the worst player in the band, right?
So true. Right.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing you said is the other thing I think you've been great at, and it comes through, is also communication, right? To get the organization on the same page. And what's shocking to me is how many senior leaders don't understand the reality of good communication, right? And it's about, it's about positivity, it's about reality, it's about frequency, right? It's about being constructive. There's a lot to it. And the best leaders, I think, are also great communicators. And I don't mean necessarily charismatic, right? I mean people who know how to connect, ask the right questions, listen well. You mentioned listening. That's huge, right? That goes along with acknowledging the humility thing that you said, right?
Wow, you were really that brilliant summary. There you go. I think you were more articulate than I was in terms of what I said.
No,
Well
no.
said.
The other thing you said that I loved is the failure thing. And that's, everyone talks about that. But the reason that's so important is because if you're not failing, then you're not running experiments. Frankly, there's no progress made ever without experiments. We're running experiments all the time. We don't like to call them that because it sounds like you don't really know what's going to happen. And that's, a good experiment is intelligent, but you have a hypothesis, you have a method, you evaluate the results, and then you either do more of the same or you make adjustments, right? But experimenting is critical, and failure is absolutely a symptom, a necessary symptom of experimentation. So.
I totally agree. And the irony of our sector is we are engaged in highly uncertain activities, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because, they're going to be uncertain because you're dealing with people. And people are not little robots that you can program. And you're dealing with people's behaviors, even when we're going, okay, well, if we apply this, if we administer this vaccine, the health indicators are going to go up. Okay. But short of dragging people out and just jabbing them in the arm, there's no way, right, to force that either. So it's all about, experimenting with this approach and that approach. And our sector doesn't like to talk about just how tentative,
Yeah.
the whole enterprise or activity is. but it is. And I think
Hmm.
we do ourselves sometimes a disservice. And I
Yeah.
get it, right? I mean, it's interesting, Chip. I told, I've been told, well, the reason we don't talk about failure is because so much of our funding comes from the US government. So you're dealing with taxpayer dollars. You really have to be good
Right.
stewards. Well, yes, of course we have to be good stewards, but there are some agencies out there. I mean, the one that comes to mind is NASA. NASA has taken some
Hmm.
big risks, took very big risks to get people to the moon. Their failures are absolutely spectacular and multi-billion, right? Because when they fail big. We also,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
yet they are also stewarding taxpayers' money,
Sure.
effectively. So we can do both at once. We can be good stewards of the taxpayer funds entrusted to us while also acknowledging that we're dealing with highly uncertain activities from which we're consistently trying to learn. I think that's the difference. Are you learning
Yeah.
from
Right.
it and
Yeah. Absolutely.
incorporating it into what you're doing next?
Yeah. That's a whole fascinating subject. There could be a series of podcasts or articles or whatever. How you communicate outcomes, both good and bad, to people who are invested in your success. Again, could be board members, could be donors, could be the USAID, could be beneficiaries. How do you communicate that? And that's tricky.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I guess one last thing I'll say about leadership is even if things are not going well, it's important to remain calm. Right? Do not run
Yeah.
around with your hair on fire like it's the
Yeah.
end of the world. And you and I, Chip, were part of a pretty important failure at Plant USA that had to do with the installation of the CRM.
The CRM. Yeah.
And I definitely contributed to that. But even as we were working like mad to figure out where all that data went, it was important for our staff, for our board, for the leadership team to say, day by day, we're going to take it day by day. And day by day, we're going to chip at the problem a little bit. And then we're
Yeah.
going to, fix it, which we
Yeah.
did. But resisting the urge of saying, it's your fault, or the scapegoating thing, or the,
Absolutely.
gosh, what are we going to do? It's very
Yeah.
easy to sometimes fall into that whole drama. And that's not useful for anybody.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've been through that multiple times. I have too. And if you need to apply the same principles during a failure that you apply during any other time, which is good listening, being rational.
Right.
And if you're running around like your hair's on fire, you can't do that, right?
Right.
So imagine you're talking to a relatively new nonprofit leader or someone who wants to be in nonprofit leadership. What advice would you give them? Maybe a few positive things, a few do's and a few don'ts as well. What would you tell them?
What advice would I give them? Well, first of all, welcome to the nonprofit sector. One of the things I love about the nonprofit sector is just how mission driven and mission oriented everybody is. Everybody is living for that mission every day.
Mhm.
And that's a privilege, right? To be able to work in an organization like that. And the other thing I would say is, so A, be happy about that. B, as you go on in your career, think about what you need to do to break down the bubble that's inevitably going to exist around you, that people
Mhm.
prefer to tell you good news than bring bad news. So how do you create those safe spaces so people can do that? How do you
Mhm.
remain accessible, and how you remain fresh and never stale? And then I guess, and then recognize when you're adding value and when it's better that you step back.
And those are three things that at least two of those three things I haven't really heard a lot. So that's good. Realize when you're being useful and step back. And the other thing you said, I'm going to boil it down to be grateful that you're in this position. You get to do this work.
Yeah.
Right. And if you don't believe in it, it's so hard. Just get out, do
Get
something
out.
else.
Yeah. Get out,
You
because
know?
you're taking space for somebody who maybe is going to be all in.
Yeah, and you're not going to be very effective. You know what I almost asked you, I've asked it to a couple of people. Do you think the world is getting better or worse? And it's a provocative question, and it's so hard to answer, and I have my own answer, but what's your take on that?
Well, I will give you my take, but I want you to tell me yours. I think to be in this business, you have to be an optimist. So I do think
Yeah.
it's getting better. I do think we are much more readily bombarded by all kinds of crap, right? And so in that context, it's easy to believe that, oh my God, there's so many bad things that are happening. But even like something like climate change, which for a very long time was entirely denied and so on, the conversations about climate change are different. Are we thinking that they're everything that they should be? No, but I believe that they're getting better. And so if the conversations are getting better, eventually as a human race, we will begin to really address it. So I think the world is getting better. I do,
I do too.
Oh, good.
I do too. So what's the best way for people to plug in to FHI 360?
Well, I would say go to our website, which we've just upgraded.
Yeah.
And,
Good.
Yeah. So it's easier to navigate, find a lot of really good information. You can see our strategy there, the latest information on all the great programs and research that we're facilitating around the world. So get engaged that way and, and reach out with any questions. We are always happy to engage. I'm always happy to engage.
Good. We will publish the website with the podcast. So,
Great.
Tessie, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you.
Well, Chip, no, honestly, this has been, just as you promised, a lot of fun. So I've enjoyed it.
And also let me know how and if I can help FHI 360.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, we'll do.
Okay, Tessie, take care. Good to see you.
Likewise, Chip.
Thanks again. Okay, bye-bye.